All right. For the audience that doesn't know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
I am Hollywood Wade. I run the Crime and Entertainment Podcast.
So, what exactly did you do to launch yourself into all of this? Because just for the people that don't know.
So, I guess there's two ways to answer that. If you're referring to how I got started in the podcast game, that kind of started out of boredom. If how that boredom came about is another story. Subsequently, I was charged with murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. This happened. There was a situation to where me and my wife, who had been together for many years, due to my decision, we decided to split up. It was a lot of things had led to this. There was some, there was some problems in the marriage, like any marriage has. There was a close friend of mine. I say close. We had known each other for a few months. We had begun to get really close. He ultimately committed suicide one night, and sadly, I was one of the first people to go to into his house because from where that happened to where I was, the proximity wasn't very far. We heard some screaming, so me and a friend of mine went down to that home, went inside, and ultimately found that he had, chose to make that decision. Unfortunately, take his own life, and it kind of left me with a thought process of like, is this what it comes to? Do you argue so much that this is your answer? And that was kind of the driving force in me choosing to split up. And then so we were kind of going forward the divorce, me and my wife. We had separated houses, and the agreement was if she found someone and she started seeing someone that, and I figured she would. She's a very pretty girl or woman, very attractive, and I figured she would. And if she did, then I was going to move back home, and then she would move out, and then we would kind of, go from there. And she told me she had met someone, so I moved back in. Everything was kind of still going as planned. We were moving forward with the divorce, and this was probably August, September. We split up around August and September. I moved back in my house in, I'd say, around November ish. And we really didn't speak all through November and most of December until we started trying to figure out what we were going to do with our kids. She had a daughter when we met. She was 3. I raised her as far as I'm concerned. She's my daughter. And then we had a son together, who at that time, I think was around 8 or 9. I'm horrible with dates, but he was around 8 or 9. And so we're trying to figure out what we're going to do as far as like visitation, because this is the first Christmas coming up where we were going to be separated. And, you could just tell during those conversations, like there was still a little something there to it wasn't like what we had was completely dead. Even though we hadn't talked in a while, you could just tell there was still a little spark. And, one thing led to another. She was asking how things were going with me. I was asking how things were going with her. But I don't think neither one of us was ready to jump back into the relationship. We still knew we had our issues. It was just obvious there was still love there. And fast forward a couple months, we started talking a little bit more often. The gentleman that she was seeing by that time, originally they were living together. He had left, went back home to Pennsylvania, where he was from. I think he showed back up after the first of the year, so between January and February, but he didn't move back in with her. He was staying at another residence. But we weren't like necessarily getting back together either. It was just more or less kind of testing the waters. I knew that she was seeing him. She knew that I was seeing, someone at the time. And as that kind of progressed, it got to a point where like, look, we need to make a decision what we're doing. If we're going to cut it, then cut it. If we're going to get back together, then we'll get back together. But it was kind of like a do or die situation type thing. It had been going on for a while. And the decision that we had come to was we were going to go ahead and get the divorce and get it final. We were going to date again, kind of start fresh, new page, blank, clear slate, however you want to word it. And then if something didn't work with that, or if something didn't pan out, then both of us are free to go our own ways, and we don't really have to worry, about anything at that point. If it looks like, hey, there's something to salvage here, then we could do small ceremony, go to the courthouse, whatever, and get remarried if we wanted to. So that was kind of the route we were going to go. We had spent Easter weekend together at the beach. We had spent, we were with her family the first couple of days on Sunday. Then we went to the beach for a few days. We come back home, and that was when we were going to tell, the people that we were seeing that we were going to go, try to work on our marriage, get back with our marriage, and, basically end things. The girl that I was seeing really took it very well. Did not really care one way or the other. The gentleman that she was seeing was not so understanding. And I wasn't aware of this until after the fact, but he became pretty violent. Well, at first, when she told him, he got mad. I think he punched some holes in the wall, and then he left. He didn't actually do anything physical to her at that point. She called me, told me that she had told him. He was upset that he had left, but she knew that he wasn't gone for good because the gentleman, he was former military. He was diagnosed with PTSD, and he was given a service dog. So he left the service dog at her residence. So she knew that he wasn't going to be gone for good. He was going to have to come back at some point and get the dog. And so I basically just told her, I was like, just keep me updated. If you need to, you can come to my house. Now, to kind of give you the lay of the land here, we're very close in proximity to where we're living. It's one big community. In these communities are different little subdivisions. So I'm in a subdivision towards the front. She's probably like 2 subdivisions back. So from her driveway to my driveway is maybe 5-6 minutes. It's not very far. We're all in the same, and we've done that, to kind of make it easier on the kids visiting and whatnot. So once she told me that, I told her just to kind of keep me updated on the situation. I'd actually went to a friend's house in the neighborhood, was hanging out there, and another guy calls me. Matter of fact, the same individual that I mentioned that went with me in the house where the guy committed suicide, he calls me, and he knew about what was going on. He knew the situation. And he had told me that my wife's car had come by and that the gentleman that she was seeing and her was in the car, and he walked up, and the guy was visibly upset. And he comes up to the car and he's like, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And he tells him, now he didn't tell me this, but I found this out after the fact, after all the depositions come out. When he comes up to the car, he says, I'm looking for Chip. Some people call me Chip. He says, "I'm looking for Chip because when I find him, I'm gonna fucking kill him." And so he knew obviously at that point something was wrong. The agreement was that guy was going to go back home, get his car, and then come back to his house. That's what they had agreed upon. So in between that, he calls me and he lets me know, he's like, "Hey, I don't know where you're at, but if you ride by here and you see Liam's car here," the gentleman's name was Liam. He said, "Don't stop." He's like, "I don't know what's wrong. I know he's upset, but I'm going to keep him here until I can figure out what's wrong." And I told him, I said, "I can probably tell you what's wrong." I said, "He got some news today that, things are over." I said, "So that's probably what's wrong." And he's like, "Well, that makes sense." He's like, "But I'm just letting you know he's here. I just don't want anything going on at my house." And so that's kind of how we left it. And I would say probably 45 minutes after that, my daughter gets home. I hadn't heard anything from my wife since she had left. About 45 minutes after that, my daughter gets home. She calls me, but my wife is on the phone. She said that once he came back, then he got a little, more upset. He grabbed her phone. He broke her phone. So she was unable to get in contact with me, and that he was making her ride around to look for me. Well, that's when they spotted my friend in the neighborhood. And then that's kind of how everything played out up to there. And so my question was like, "Well, are y'all good? Is everybody good?" She said everybody was good. He was supposed to be staying at that home. So after that, I go home. I go to my house, I think I was watching the UFC that night. And then probably like 1:00, between 12 and 1:00, I get a text from him, the then boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, or, however you want to word it. And he asked me, "Am I home?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you mind if we talk?" And I said, "No." And he said, "If you're comfortable, we can go to your buddy's house," which is the guy I'm referring to. He lives like 5 houses down from me. And I said, "Yeah, I can come down there. I'm cool with that." And so I go down there, and some point while they were there, he had told my buddy that he was going to go home, get his stuff, and go to a hotel. He didn't go there. He went back, started arguing. Somehow or another, they got on the phone with my wife. And the only way that he would leave, he told my buddy, he said, "I'll leave if you can get him to your house to talk to me. So that's how that conversation come about. He wanted to talk to me. So we go back to the garage, and to make a long story short, he's kind of wanting to know what he wasn't being told. Were we seeing each other for a long period of time? Was stuff going on behind his back? Yada, 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 which it was. But I told him, I was like, look, man, honestly, that's my wife. So it's really none of your damn business. But to answer your question, no. We just decided we were going to do this here recently. The reason being is I don't want to make him more mad or rub his face in anything and then send him back over there upset. So that was kind of the thought process behind that. I don't think he believed me, but what could he really say? He didn't really have any proof that I was lying. And that was really essentially it. I mean, I would say it was maybe tense in the beginning, but once he knew he wasn't going to get what I was asking for, I think maybe he thought I was going to be like, oh yeah, we've been seeing each other for months. What are you going to do? I don't know if that's what he thought he was going to get. But once I didn't give it to him, it just kind of turned into really a conversation with three guys in a garage. I mean, a very, awkward conversation to say the least, but that's kind of what it manifested into. And that lasted, at this point, we're probably at 1:00. That lasted to about 3:30. And then the guy who lived at that residence, he said, I'm ready to go to bed. He's like, are you going to stay here or do you want me to run you home? And he looks at me and he said, I'll just have, him run me home. He said, are you cool with that? And I said, yeah, I'm cool with that. So my buddy looks at me to kind of like, are you okay with that? I said, yeah, I'm good. Cause at this point we had been an hour or so, like nothing confrontational was going on. Nothing out of the way was happening. And so I felt comfortable doing that. So we get in the car and then he proceeds to tell me, he's like, hey, if I go home and she's awake, we're probably just going to start arguing again. And I'm like, dude, I lived with a girl for 15 years. I know what you mean. And it's almost like we're laughing about the situation. And he said, if you're cool with it, man, he said, I'd rather just go to your house and hang out. And like, it kind of hit me a little bit off kilter, but at the same time, like, I know what he was saying. It made sense. Like, I knew that if he went back over there, he probably would start arguing. And so my house, again, like I said, is only 5 houses down from where we were at. I did drive because it was slightly chilly. So we drive, we go back into my house, we pull in the driveway, and he proceeds to tell me a story about a bracelet that he has on his wrist. And this bracelet was tied to a guy that he was in combat with. And he starts telling me this story. And in the midst of the story, he starts crying. Now, this is a grown man. Obviously, I wouldn't classify us as friends by any means, but he doesn't really know me that well. And he's crying, bawling in the car as he's telling me the story. They were in service together. The guy got shot in the head. He was doing what he was trying to do to save him, but ultimately the guy did not make it. And that was the reason why he was discharged from the Army and diagnosed with PTSD. That's the story he told me. Now, later on, I found out that story was not accurate. He was actually never in combat. However, he was intelligence. Basically, he was somewhere else. He was telling the guy where to go, and the intelligence that he gave that guy led him into basically an ambush, and the guy was shot. So I'm sure it bothered him. I'm sure he felt guilty and carried the weight of that death. But the way he said it to me was like he was there in battle with him, and it just wasn't the case. So at this point, I'm thinking his guard is completely dropped. The man is crying. I really don't have anything to worry about. This dude almost just sounds like he needs somebody to talk to. So we go into my home. Everything is still fine from there. We talk about his kids, my kids. We do share a drink or a shot. He goes out the front, has some smokes. I let my dog out the front and the back to use the bathroom. Everything is kosher for probably 2 hours. We get on the subject of tattoos, and he said, he was referring to my son. He said, yeah, one of his buddies' mom was talking smack and saying something about people with tattoos or trash or something like that. And he's like, has she ever said anything to you? And I'm like, no, I'm covered in them. And I kind of pulled down my shirt, and I don't know if you can see, I got one right here. And he sees that one. And when I do that, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's a scar here. It's a scar from open heart surgery. And he sees that, and he lifts up my shirt. He's like, damn, what happened here? And I'm like, I had open heart surgery in 2001. Well, as he's lifted my shirt up, I don't really know how he wouldn't see my weapon, but my weapon was on my side. I'm a CWP holder, had been for years. I had had that weapon for years. That was my carry weapon. So nothing was out of the ordinary. A lot of times people will say when they hear the story, like, what are you doing with a gun in your kitchen? Well, I left with it. And then when we come back, the kitchen was the only place we were. No bedrooms in my house are downstairs. All of my bedrooms are upstairs. So when I go upstairs, I take everything off, put it in its place. I never went upstairs after I got back home. So the gun never came off. He didn't mention it. He didn't say anything about it, but there's no way he didn't see it. He sees the scar and he kind of just steps back and he does one of those like bear hug type things, you know, especially when people have had a drink or two and they kind of bear hug you, pick you up and put you back down. He does one of them numbers and he's like, man, under different situations, he's like, you and I would have probably been great friends. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. And then he asks where the bathroom is. I point to it. He goes to the bathroom. It's probably around close to 6 a.m. at this point, late 5 o'clock, early 6. I haven't texted my wife in a long time since I think when I was going down there. So I shoot her a quick text and I'm just like, hey, everything's good. We're at my house. Put the phone back down. He comes out of the bathroom. He comes around the corner and I'm standing in my kitchen, which is kind of a small area. And my back's to the kitchen. He walks straight up to me, doesn't say a word, and boom, hand straight up under me. Like it wasn't a choke, more so it was like kind of a control. So he's pushing up under my chin like that. And this was a pretty big guy. He was above 6 foot. He was a pretty muscular dude. And I actually lift off the ground, like both of my feet come off the ground. And I was basically sat on my stove. And so it's a flat top stove. So it's a smooth surface. I'm trying to like slide and work my way off. He's pushing me so hard that I actually am sliding on top of the stove and I get back to the floor and I look at him and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And he says, I'm going to fucking kill you. And so I'm just shaking my head and I'm like, dude, if you don't get off me, I'm going to shoot you. And he cocks his hand back. He's coming. I can see it coming. And I try my best to kind of lift my chin up a little bit because he's not really, like I said, he's not got me around the throat, but he's more controlling me. So he's pushing me up. And so I kind of lift up at the last second. He clips me, but he didn't make full contact. So his momentum kind of carries him this way and he releases with his left hand. Now, when he does that, I step back, I draw out and I aim and I shoot. It was in the kitchen. It was very loud. I thought it was only 2 shots. Turns out it was actually 3. He dropped immediately. He was already coming back towards me. And at this point I was literally in the corner in my kitchen. He dropped immediately. I called 911, told him what happened. They arrived. They put me in handcuffs originally and they said, you're not under arrest. We just got to assess the situation. They had told me to leave the handgun out. I did that, was complying with everything. And at this point, I'm still not thinking that I've done anything wrong. I'm like, I was attacked in my home. The guy said he was going to kill me. I gave a warning. I did what I had to do. I'm not thinking I'm fixing to be arrested. After I've been put in this car, a cop eventually does come up to me and says, you're under arrest. And they read me my rights. And she asked if I want to answer any questions. And I said, no, not without a lawyer. This is probably an hour after the shooting, after the first arrivals of the officer. I'm still sitting in a car outside the house. I mean, now it's like daybreak. It's probably 6:30. Cars are coming. Cops are coming. Ambulance is coming. The SUVs from the fire department is coming. I mean, and we're in like a neighborhood where there's a house every few feet, very little yard. And I mean, everybody's like looking out the window, driving by. I mean, it's unlike anything this neighborhood had probably ever experienced. And I'm in there about an hour. She comes up, she reads me my rights. I tell her I'm not talking without a lawyer. Still, people steady coming, steady going. I'm in this car probably 2 to 3 hours, maybe. And I finally motioned for one of the officers when they come by. I was like, I said, man, I got to use the bathroom. And he was like, can't do it. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it. I was like, it's either going to be in the car or I can go in the yard, but I've got to go. So they let me come in my house and they tell me I can go use the bathroom. I do that. They ask me, is there anywhere I can change clothes? And I'm like, yeah, my room's upstairs. I was like, this is my house. I live here. So we go upstairs, change clothes. They take everything that I had on except for my underwear, take my shirt, pants, I think everything. And then ask me if there's somewhere I can go to while they finish their investigation. So in my mind now at this point, they're starting to piece together what happened, because I went from I'm being, cuffed till they figure it out. Then I was read my rights and being placed under arrest. Now they're telling me I can go somewhere and hang out. And so I'm like, yeah, I can go around the corner to a friend's house. I do that until probably 2 hours later, a deputy comes by and he tells me I can go back home. And I'm like, all right, so what are we going to do? He said, are you going to answer the questions? I said, well, no, like I said, not without a lawyer, but I will answer them with a lawyer. And so we make an appointment to do that the next day on Monday. This is Sunday morning now at this point in time. So we make an appointment to do this on Monday. We go back to the home, we clean everything up. It wasn't really that much there, to be honest. It wasn't a lot of blood. It wasn't like you see in the movies where it just flies all over the place. All these shots were center mass. The gentleman had been drinking a good bit. He was actually 3 times the legal limit in alcohol. So there wasn't a lot of blood, even on the floor. It wasn't like, what you see in the movies. So
why was there? So I'm just curious. So, I'm not going to lie when I say that I've seen my fair share of videos on the internet of, guy gets shot and there's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Like I could go on Twitter right now, and see a video of that, because I've seen a million of those videos, and immediately the guys, there's blood on the floor, there's blood everywhere. So when you're saying that the guy wasn't bleeding that much, how come? Like I know the splatter part, that's not entirely accurate, but when it comes to the blood loss, it's usually crazy. So why wasn't there that much?
I would think, I guess it would just be the placement. So like, this wasn't a headshot. Obviously, if you shoot somebody in the head, you're going to get a lot of blood, splatter, transfer, leakage, and stuff like that. Everything was like chest, stomach, like right in the center mass area, which is where they train you to shoot during your CWP classes. Another factor you got to add in is what type of ammo. If these are hollow points, they're going to do a whole lot more damage than a regular full metal jacket bullet. These were full metal jacket bullets. These were not, anything special. And the caliber was a 9mm. So I think the caliber, the type of ammo, all that plays a part. As a matter of fact, I got some footage back from the arriving officer's body cam, and he's standing there when the EMT gets there. So I would probably say from the time I called EMT, the officer got there first, the ambulance probably got there 8 minutes later. So probably almost 20 minutes between the call and when the ambulance came. This individual, like I said, was a pretty big sized guy. When they picked him up off the ground, you could barely see some blood start to come through the back of the shirt. And this is on their footage. You could barely see it. Now, another factor I will say is he was also wearing 3 shirts. He had on a t-shirt, he had on a long sleeve shirt, and then he had over a I would say like an Under Armour style wicking hoodie. Like I said, because it was a little chilly. So there could have been blood in between the shirts that didn't make it to the floor. That could have been a factor. But like I said, it was a light gray shirt. So when they picked him up to take him from the floor to the, I don't know what you call it, then what you put him on when they take you to the ambulance, gurney, you could barely see blood starting to come through the back of the shirt. So I guess technically I wouldn't know how to answer that question. I would just give you the factors that I know has something to do with it. Because a 9mm with a regular bullet, if it's center mass, you're not going to immediately see blood starting to pool up under it. If it's a hollow point, yeah. If it's a bigger mag, yeah, obviously with a shotgun, that's a whole different story. But none of these were in an area where I don't think it hit anything major. And again, I don't know if the blood alcohol content would have had anything to do with it either, because when you're drunk, your blood's thin, which in my mind, I think you would make you bleed more, but it wasn't. And that was one of the things that come up in trial later, was they were saying that he didn't have any blood on him. Well, in the 911 call, you hear the lady tell me to go get a towel and put it on his chest. When I lift up his shirt, I had to look around to actually find the entrance ones, because they were really, really small. You could barely see them. It's not like there was just blood every here, there, and yonder. Like, I had to actually look and not overlook them. And as a matter of fact, I did overlook one because I only seen 2. And so I put the towel down over it until the ambulance got there. And, there's a picture of that in there that's on the camera when they come in. So my lawyer argued, it was like, well, if, he had to have put it there. That gentleman didn't get up and go get it. He had to put the towel there. So there just wasn't a lot of blood loss. I mean, that's really the best way I can answer that question, to be honest with you.
So so this is the beginning that you're describing. And I know
this is all basically within the first couple hours of the early morning. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's go into more depth about what ended up happening later on. So from my understanding, there was police corruption that was involved in your case. Right. That's how it's most often described.
I wouldn't maybe go so far as to call it police corruption, but definitely almost idiocracy. And I don't even know if I would say police other than the one detective. So to kind of give you a list of what she's messed up on here. She said, obviously they take everything into account. The two of the bullets went through him and hit things in the house. One did not. So obviously I think you could take a schoolyard kid and say, all right, if you got 3 entrance wounds and 2 exit wounds, how many bullets should there be for you to find? 2, right? They only find 1, and that's what they put into evidence. I actually find the other one after I've came back to my home. It had went through a 24 pack of water, and it went through about 2 bottles and landed in the water. So she completely didn't find one of the bullets. Once we called and reported that, at that point in time, I secured a lawyer. Once we called and reported that, they come back out. They bag it, tag it, take pictures and everything. They leave the camera that they took the pictures with. So like I said, I don't know if I would go so far as to call it corruption, but definitely incompetence. There's definitely a lot of incompetence at play. I think she tried to create a narrative that wasn't there. And this could be for many different factors. She was not a seasoned detective. She was just promoted to detective. I was her first murder case. If you want my honest opinion, I think she was trying to spin something that wasn't there to fit her narrative. None of what she said in her reports was backed up by neither physical evidence or forensics evidence. Nothing. Her points were, he didn't have any blood on him, so how could they be in close contact? Well, as I said, there wasn't any blood. And that's evident from, when the arriving officer comes in there, his body cam's not going to lie. There's no blood anywhere. The EMTs, their stuff isn't going to lie. They have the shirts there and there's not a lot of blood. Now, the key point here is I'm saying we're in close proximity. She's trying to say that we weren't. We were separated. So the refrigerator was the big kind of key component to this case. 2 of the bullets that went through him, one hits the refrigerator door handle, and the other one, it ricochets and hits a wall. The other one went into the 24 pack of water that I referenced earlier. So for these bullets to do that, they have to have time to V, because it hits the right side of the refrigerator door. The other one hits the 24 pack of water that's beside the refrigerator. So they have to have time to separate. If he's farther back, then they're going to hit almost side by side. They're not going to have time to V out. So she kind of screwed herself almost with her reasoning. And then another key thing, and I didn't find this out until later, was when I told him where I was standing, once one of the shells got ejected from the shots, it actually landed in the sink and was found in the sink. So it proves that I was standing where I was standing. And also, when he fell, he was a pretty big guy. My kitchen's not that wide. Had he been any further back than right in front of me, he would have landed with his head up against the stove. So it really kind of painted a picture. Whenever you see this kitchen, there's no way that I'm lying. And like I said, my lawyer told me one of the first times we had a conversation. He said, look, you can tell me whatever story you want, and I don't know if you're lying. He said, but the teams that I have, the forensics guys that I have, the science guys that I have, he said, they will be able to tell me if you're lying. He said, evidence does not lie. Science does not lie. And that was what I had on my side. I was not lying, and science proved it. And she went with her narrative. We were just farther away. I pulled out a gun and shot him because I was mad at him. And I'm assuming the narrative was to try to get my wife back. But at that point, we had already decided to get back together. So what am I shooting a guy for when I'm already getting what, I wanted? It doesn't even make any sense.
So if I might ask, what was the guy's motive here? Because so he's making the comment to you of, in another life, we probably would have been best friends or really close friends. And, you guys are cool though, but it's this very odd relationship. I don't know, maybe this isn't the right way to put it, but almost like a 2.5 Men.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, let me make this clear too. We didn't really have a relationship. We didn't really have any conversations or talk until that night. We knew who each other were. Obviously, I would have to go drop off my son. I'm sure when they dropped off mine, we seen each other, whatever. But as far as us having a full blown conversation longer than, just a second or two in passing, this is the first time we had actually, went to that extent.
So, right. So, okay. So ultimately, from what I'm gathering, the fact that he's confiding in you, all these things, right, which are kind of not true. Ultimately, you later find out, but he is confiding in you that he has issues, that he has regrets, and he is opening himself up, right? And he was drinking as well. So I would imagine that this is coming in many ways from the heart, but also like I'm sure he's mixing up the details while he's drunk. So in saying that, he's coming at you. So he has to go to the bathroom and then immediately he comes at you, right? So play by play that again. So he's asking you, where can I go? And then you tell him where to go. And then immediately, I guess you look away for a second.
I'm not necessarily looking away. The way my kitchen is constructed, you have if I'm standing in the front of it, you have refrigerator to the right, the stove is right here, the sink is right here. Then there's a hallway down here, which is where the bathroom is. So once we're kind of in the front part of the kitchen where we have that little exchange where he kind of bear hugs me, picks me up, says that, he goes to the bathroom, or he asks where the bathroom is. I point down the hall. I then move so I'm not in direct line of sight. I text my wife real quick, and then my back is to the stove. I'm kind of standing like this with my back to the stove. Now I played a lot of scenarios out of my head of why he did it, what his motive was, why say something endearing, then come out and go straight to violence. One of the theories is when he picked me up like that, he was seeing if he could pick me up, if he thought, hey, I can handle this guy. I can maneuver him around. I can physically do what I want with this guy. That's one theory. The second one, he had shot steroids earlier that night. He was actually I'm not too familiar. Obviously, if anybody can tell, I'm not a, very physical, imposing individual, but it's stacking, I think, is what 2 different types of steroids. That's what he was doing. He had shot up 2 different types of steroids that night. So I don't know if maybe that was something that kicked in. You combine that with the drinking. Now with me, he had only had, I think, 2 shots at my house and 1 beer. What he had had prior to that, earlier in the night, I didn't know. He didn't seem that drunk to me, but I didn't know the guy. So you had all that, plus he had the PTSD, which he was on daily PTSD medication for. It could have been a number of things. When he comes out, he goes straight up to me. He says he's going to kill me. Maybe I've thought that he seen that gun on me. He knew that if I was pushed to a certain point that I would probably do it. And it's almost like suicide by cop. Somebody doesn't want to take their own life, but they're going to charge a cop and make the cop take their life. So maybe he thought if I put him in what he feels is imminent danger, he'll take me out and that'll solve my problems. I really don't know. I don't know the guy well enough to, these are all just assumptions that I played through in my head. Maybe there's some merit to them. I really don't know. The only thing I can say 100% is had he not come out of that bathroom and been violent, that I don't think none of this would have ever, I know none of this would have ever happened. None of this would have ever taken place.
So ultimately, right, you're out now, right? You're a freed man.
Yes.
You didn't get punished, right? Ultimately.
I got arrested. So I think earlier when I left off was we were going to make an appointment, let my lawyer answer the questions. I did that Monday. We wrote a statement. Wednesday, I got a call from my lawyer telling me they were going to arrest me and they were going to charge me with murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. And I needed to turn myself in the following day at 12 o'clock. Now, keep in mind, this guy was my divorce lawyer. He was not a criminal. I mean, he'd done some criminal work, but he wasn't who I was going to entrust with this case. We'll put it like that. So I do not have a past. I do not have a criminal past. I've never been arrested. I'm not from the streets. I've never been in trouble. The worst thing I've had is a speeding ticket. So I don't know the guy to call. I don't know who I need for this situation. I start making phone calls. One name keeps popping up. Andy Savage, Andy Savage, Andy Savage. So I'm like, obviously this is my guy. I call at this point. It's after hours because it was later in the day on Wednesday when I got the call. I reach his receptionist. I tell her what's going on. She's like, can you come in tomorrow at 2 o'clock? I'm like, 2 o'clock, I'm gonna be in jail. Like, I can't come at 2 o'clock. She says, come at 7. So we come at 7. I basically spill out the whole story, kind of what I've done here to you. He gets my surrender pushed back from Thursday all the way till Sunday. So that's the kind of stroke that he had as a lawyer. I do turn myself in. He has a lot of stuff ready. He said normally he likes to let his client sit in jail for a while and kind of let the heat die off, but he felt this situation didn't really call for that. I caught a break because when you're charged with murder, you cannot be given bond from a magistrate. You have to be seen by the circuit court. At least this is how it works in South Carolina. I'm not sure about other parts of the states, but the circuit court rotates from county to county. So if it's not in your county the week you're arrested, you sit there until it comes back around, however long that may take. Luckily, it was in our county that week. So I was able to turn myself in on Sunday, have the bond hearing Monday, and then found out that I got bond Monday later in the day, and I was actually released on Tuesday. So ultimately, I only done a little over 2 days and 2.5 days in jail. I was charged with murder. Now that that case stretched for roughly 5 years and some change. We never went back to court other than a preliminary hearing. And then after that, it was it. I was on house arrest the entire time. There was a lot of limitations on where I could go, what I could do, which kind of led to the boredom part of what I was talking about, of why I got into podcasting. And then ultimately, 2022, end of 2022, November 2022, I got the call that it was completely dropped and it was over. So we never had to go to trial, which was a good thing. Trials are very expensive. What we were actually doing was in the process of what's called an immunity hearing based on the grounds of castle law and self-defense. I'm from South Carolina. We have what's called the castle law here, which is if you inferior your life, you can use anything up into including deadly force in your home, your car, or your place of employment. Castle law extends to those 3 areas. So that was what we were actually waiting on, was to have a castle law hearing. Now the podcast kind of comes into play because while this was going on, I was having to make trips to New York. I was having to get permission from the bondsman and also the solicitor to go to New York because I'm leaving the state. Now he's doing this once, then a couple months later I have to go again. And then finally my lawyer's like, look, we're getting a little tired of this. It's like over 5 years now. We're ready to go ahead and make a decision. And my lawyer comes to me and he tells me, he said, I got to play. He said, it's a little risky, but we give them everything we have. We give them everything. We lay it out. And so our forensics guy basically made like a timeline of kind of the things I've told you already. They said that, he was further away. There's no way he was because of this. They say it was lack of blood and no blood on him, but you're not going to get blood because it's not going to come through 3 shirts, given the caliber and everything else. So that's kind of what we did. We give it to them. They actually come to my home. The new solicitor, because the solicitor changed like 3 times in the course of this 5 years. The new solicitor, his number 2, they come to my home. They see everything. I never took my refrigerator out. I left that refrigerator there with the dents in it from the bullets. Left it there. The spot that it hit the wall, never repainted it. Left it there with the sticker that they put on there that day. Never moved any of it. So he got to see exactly where we were standing. I told him exactly where we locked up. He got to see a glass that was knocked over on the counter. That was another thing. She said that there wasn't any signs of a struggle, which the pictures from the arriving officer shows there was glasses knocked over. There was a shot glass on the floor. I actually got to put that in his hand. And I'm like, here, do you think you can just easily knock that over? So I think he was able to take all that in, see the scene, see the refrigerator, see where we were standing. And then about 2 months after that is when I got the call that everything was done and dropped. So as of right now, yes, I'm a free man.
So what did you, so I have never personally taken somebody's life, right? So, and it's a funny way of prefacing it, but it's true. Like, I have never been through the experience of having to take somebody's life. So
I would think most people haven't, especially if you're not in any sort of law enforcement or anything like that, or military.
Right. So what was that feeling like, realizing that you have done something not only to hurt somebody, but that is irreversible? Because I mean, we've all hurt people, but death is the thing that is irreversible. You cannot undo somebody's death. It is the most extreme, or it is the most extreme thing that you can do to somebody, other than maybe paralyzing them.
Right. It's one of those things that you can't undo. You can repay somebody's debt if you do them wrong. You can, possibly mend a broken heart if you do them wrong, but it is very permanent. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't have time to process it, and I still haven't, to be honest, but now I just don't want to. I'm kind of just stuck in a mode of going forward. So play it like this. This happens that morning. I had to shoot him. Adrenaline is pumping. It's finally sets in. I understand that day that he did ultimately pass away, but it's like my adrenaline's pumping so hard. I haven't really got to sink in that, this is what happened. This is what I did. 2 days later after this, I find out that I'm being charged with murder. Immediately, my focus and energy and everything is shifted into, all right, now I got to, figure out what I'm going to do about this. I get arrested. I get out. After I get out, I'm fired from my job that I'd had for 15 years. So now immediately my mind is on, all right, now I got to find a place to work while I got a pending murder charge over my head. That's not exactly easy. They frown on that kind of thing when they run your background. So it's like so many things started snowballing. I never really had a chance to go back and visit, what about this when you did this? And I don't know whether it was a blessing in disguise. I mean, it's hard to constitute all these things as a blessing, but all the things happened right after it. I never had a chance to just dwell on this. But even now I can sit here and say that, like, I'm not going to say that it was going to be something. Obviously I wish it never happened, but this isn't a situation to where I was driving drunk and I hit somebody on the side of the road and it was my fault because I acted carelessly. I protected myself, and I don't look at it as I killed somebody. I look at it as I killed somebody that was trying to kill me. And that's how I've been able to kind of process this and move forward. Because anybody that knows me, man, I'm not, like I said, from elementary on, I've always been the guy that's going to crack a joke, life of the party, front and center, put on a show, whatever. I'm not the guy that wants to fight. I'm not that guy. So I was put into a position to where it was me or him. And at the end of the day, and literally that's what he told me, I'm going to kill you. And so at that point, man, it's going to be me or him. And I done everything I could to make sure that it wasn't me that, whose life ended that night. And, I feel bad for everybody involved. He did have 2 kids. I feel bad for his kids. I feel bad for his family. He did have a mother and a daughter. He had extended, I think he had some, other relatives. I feel bad for all those people because this is a tragedy. But at the same time, like, again, my life was threatened. He was trying to kill me. I have a family that I need to be around for. And had he not attacked me the way he did, this would not have happened. And that's kind of how I've compartmentalized it. I survived. I didn't kill anybody. I survived somebody trying to kill me.
So ultimately, right, if you were to go back to that night, right now, let's say, so one of the common questions that people always say to cops, or not really a question, but a comment that people always say about cops is, why didn't you shoot him in the leg? Why did you have to shoot him here? Why did you have to do that? Why did you have to do that? So ultimately, you've lived through the experience of having to make that game time decision where you don't have the time to think, oh, well, I'm going to shoot him here instead. So what is that line of thinking, if there is any, right? Were you concerned about, I don't want to shoot him in the head because I don't want to kill him, or nothing at all?
No, I was not. I was not aiming. So to start with, that's a ridiculous statement. That's for people that aren't familiar with shooting guns. Say that when they have no concept of, like you said, adrenaline or anything like that going, life or death situation. That's something that somebody's reading, and then they say when they're sitting on their couch or sitting on their ass, they're not in the heat of it. In a CWP class, you're taught you aim center mass. And the reason why you don't aim for the head or the leg or the arm is because unless you're just a really good marksman, you're probably going to miss. And the fact is, you can shoot somebody in the leg, and if it hits the right artery, you're going to kill them there too. But trying to aim at a limb or a head, somebody's obviously, if I'm pointing a gun at you and I'm starting to shoot, you're going to try to move around a little bit. You're probably not going to hit that. That's just fact. But you're going to aim for this, you got a better chance of hitting that, which is every class is going to teach you center mass. So I done what I was taught in the heat of the moment. I shot everything center mass. I mean, it was 3 shots. Every one of them hit center mass. Now, this is a key too. Like once someone's down, once the threat is eliminated, you can't go up and shoot them more. And people always say that online too. I would have emptied the whole clip. Well, let me tell you something. If you empty the clip, then you got a problem. Because once the threat is eliminated, that's it. You can't go up. Once he dropped down to the floor, if I'd have walked up and put 4 more in him, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now. I'd be doing life in prison. Because once the threat of your threat is eliminated, you no longer have the right to self-defense once that threat is eliminated. So that's the biggest reason why you're not going to try to aim for a limb or anything else. Again, too, it's life and death. You're trying to do what you're trying to do to survive. You go to your instincts, and hopefully you go to what you were taught. That's what I was taught, and that's what I did.
So ultimately, after going through this very, very, very long, hard experience between from start to finish, this is like a tragedy and an unfortunate circumstance. So ultimately, what did you learn from it?
I learned that somebody's life can be flipped completely upside down in just, one instance. Going there that night, my mindset was, I'm going to put this guy at ease. I'm going to get it to the point to where my wife and kids can get out of that house and get back with me, and we're done with it. The man had no ties to this area. His family didn't live here. He didn't have any roots. He didn't even have a permanent residence. My thought was, once he knew it was over, he's going to leave, and then I'm not going to have to worry about it. Obviously, that didn't happen. But that was my point in that night, was to smooth it over with him long enough to get them back here with me. So I guess to kind of sum that up is, you don't really know when one instance will really change the shape of your life forever. I was with that company that I had worked for around 15 years. Never saw myself leaving. It was a good company. They had good retirement. Unfortunately, I had to use the retirement that I had at that point to pay for a lawyer, because those guys do not work for cheap, nor do they work for peanuts. But that whole thing just changed so many things for me. It changed the way I felt about law enforcement. To that point, I trusted law enforcement. I thought that if I'm sitting here and I watch somebody get arrested on TV, and matter of fact, I'll share a quick story. I got out. I was probably out 2 or 3 days. I'm sitting at home, I'm watching TV, and I see that they arrested a kid for shooting his father. And then I go, of course, now what everybody does, I go to my phone, Facebook, I start reading the article and the comments. Everybody's in there, glad they got him off the street, get this scum off the street, lock him up, throw away the key. That's everybody's initial reaction when you see the arrest. You think that if they arrested him, he done something wrong. But now my mode of thinking is, all right, why did he do what he did? Was the guy beating him? Was he beating his mom? Was he molesting his sister? Was he molesting him? There's a lot of reasons why things can happen. And did he even do it to begin with? How do they know he did it? Because now I know I'm in the position to where just because you're arrested does not mean you've done anything wrong. And just because you're charged with something does not mean you've done anything wrong. But what happens is the stigma sticks with you. People don't remember me as the guy that got the murder charge dropped. They remember me as the guy that shot somebody in his house, and that's kind of the things you have to deal with. And that followed you. It followed me for 5 years while I was going. Very hard to find employment. Now after it's over, you think they made a big news deal and you think I had news vans outside my house like I did when it happened. And you think they've done all these pages and Facebook posts after it was dropped. No, but they did when it happened. So it's just one event, man, can totally change your life. And, some positives have come out of this. I was stuck at home. I was really depressed. I needed an outlet. I'm a very outgoing person. I love to talk. I love to conversate. I love to, just have long in-depth conversations. That's why I started the podcast. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. At that point in time around COVID, everybody started a true crime podcast. And I wanted to cover some true crime, but I didn't want that to be my only shtick. And I was talking to a friend of mine and he was like, what do you want to cover? And I'm like, maybe some crime, maybe movies, maybe this, maybe that. And he's like, so you want to do crime and entertainment? And I'm like, that's a pretty catchy name. I think I might go with that. And that started Crime and Entertainment. Originally, we just talked about stuff. I wasn't interviewing guests. And then that kind of snowballed into me interviewing people. And the first guy I interviewed was Lilo Brancato Jr. from the movie A Bronx Tale. And he was also in Sopranos and Crimson Tide and Renaissance Man. That went well. That kind of snowballed. And then it just started growing and growing and growing. And now I have guests every week. I drop one episode a week with an in-depth interview. It's just me now. The guy I had in the beginning dropped out. He didn't really have any, visions of kind of continuing. He was just doing it really as a favor to me. And that almost became my therapy through this. So, there's been some highs and some lows throughout this 5 years, but I say, I'm now where I'm at with this podcast. If I met some amazing people, some famous people, some famous actors, people from Sopranos, people from Sons of Anarchy. I interviewed Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong. I interviewed Gianni Russo from The Godfather. One of the more very interesting interviews I had was with Tom Sizemore from Heat and Saving Private Ryan, and Natural Born Killers. He's since passed away, but I was one of the last people he interviewed before he passed away. And so it's like, I think I had to go through all that to get here. But at the same time, no matter what life deals you, you've got to look for a silver lining or something positive in it. And, had that not happened, had it played out like I wanted it to, me and my wife got back together, that guy moved away, I wouldn't be doing this. And it wouldn't have opened my eyes, I don't think, to how flawed our justice system is, because there's a lot of people in jail that really shouldn't be there. And I'll be honest, had I been poor, I wasn't rich by any means. I was middle class. But with my 401k, I had access to a lot of money because the company that I worked for was very generous in that. I had about over $100,000 in there. So I was able to pay off my lawyer in full, or mostly in full. I had to come up out a little bit, but for the most part, pay him in full and kind of keep myself afloat. Had I not had that, who knows? It could have went different, but that's the difference between a paid lawyer and a public defender. So you take somebody that's not in the financial means to fight this, right? They get the same charge. They got to get a public defender. The public defender can't hire the forensics guys that I did. They can't hire, the experts that I was able to hire. So what's that going to happen to him? He's going to have to cut a deal because his public defender is going to tell him, hey, you're looking at life, man. If you plead to, involuntary manslaughter, I'm just spitballing these numbers, 10 years, 15 years, good behavior, you be out. Maybe you do 7 or 8. I'm just spitballing this. They're going to take that. Because I would rather take 8 years and know I'm going to get out than go and face life in prison. So you get caught up in this flawed justice system because the prosecutors and the solicitors, they don't care about innocent or guilty. And nothing will ever make me believe different. What they care about is a conviction. They don't care if you really did it. They just want that conviction because that's how they get paid. They always talk about, hey, I've got a 98% conviction rate. You have that because most people cut plea deals, because most people can't afford a good lawyer. That's why you have a 98% conviction rate. If the numbers were really true and people could really tell the number and the percentages of people in jail that were innocent, it would be staggering. And people don't realize that until they're in the middle of it, until they're the ones being accused of something that they didn't do, until they're the ones on the line. Then it kind of opens their eyes to the situation. And I've been fortunate enough to interview some people that have spent years, 3 years, 17 years. One guy did 22 years and was innocent. So it happens. It happens all the time. People just don't know about it. I'll be honest, I never looked up innocent people in jail before this happened to me. It wasn't on my radar. I didn't think about it. But now that it happened to me, I really immersed myself in how flawed this justice system is. And I try to use my platform to help spread awareness for that. I mean, I do other stuff too, but that's kind of like a little thing that's really near and dear to my heart, is exposing how easily somebody can wind up in jail for years or the rest of their life, and they didn't even do anything wrong. It really opened my eyes to all this and how it works. And it's just not everything is as it seems. And I think nowadays as a society, we're so quick to judge, because if you walk out tomorrow and you get in a fight with somebody and you hit somebody in the head and they fall and they hit their head on the concrete and they die, you're going to get arrested. You may beat the case with a lawyer, but everybody's going to remember you got arrested. You killed it. Everybody's going to make their assumptions through Facebook that are states away, that's nowhere near, that didn't see what happened. Everybody's going to make assumptions. And we're so quick to judge without knowing the facts. And that's, unfortunately, that's just the society we're in today.
100%. And I think to end this off, I think I'm going to, what advice would you give to young people?
Just be cognizant, man, of your surroundings, and know that just because you believe you're in your right, that doesn't mean someone else is going to believe you're in the right. I could see if I'd have went through all this, if I was at a bar or if I was, at somewhere else, but I'm thinking in my own home, I've got the right to do what I did. I've got the right to protect myself, and I was wrong. So I think it's important for people to know the laws, especially if you're going to carry a gun. I know now gun laws are a little bit more lenient. You don't even need a CWP now to carry a gun, at least where I live at. So if you're going to carry a gun, be up to date on the laws. Be up to date on what is considered self-defense. Self-defense is not me starting a fight with someone, that person then start whipping my ass, and then me pulling out a gun because I'm getting beat up. You can't claim self-defense with that. If you're the aggressor, self-defense is off the table. So I just think a lot of people that are, especially, I like to call them keyboard warriors, that say all these things. Oh, they come to my house, they'll have this waiting on them. That right there is premeditated. That's premeditation. So it's a lot of things that people don't think about. So just make sure that you're aware of what you're talking about. Get hip to the laws, especially if you're a gun owner, a gun carrier. There's a lot of things that people do that could come back to bite them if something happened. I've seen people post on Facebook about they got in a fight with somebody. If anybody sees him, let me know where he's at, because when I find him, I got 9 things for him, or something stupid like that. That's admitted premeditation on a public forum, that if you do happen to meet up with that guy and you do shoot him, you're going away for life. So people just really need to kind of get hip to the laws on this. And, obviously try to avoid these situations at all costs. Some of them will happen regardless. But, I think a lot of just being aware of your surroundings can help. If you're not familiar with the area, don't go there. Be mindful of who you have around you. Be mindful of who's in your circle. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing, especially when it's related to gun laws and anything like that, just know the laws, know the right ways to handle it, know the ins and outs. There is an insurance, and this isn't a plug. I didn't have them. I maybe wish I would have, but USCAA, I think, is an insurance, and allegedly they protect you in situations like this. If you have to use your, gun in deadly force, they pay for a lot of your lawyer fees. They pay for a lot. I don't know the specifics amount. I don't have it. Hopefully I'll never need this again in my life, but that's an option too for people that want to carry guns, because it possibly could have saved me a lot of money. I really need to figure out how to get in contact with them and be a spokesperson for them, really.
So I actually do have one more question from
Yeah.
that. So without stopping the murder or the self-defense killing, right? Without stopping it in any way, what would you tell yourself the day before?
Get ready. Because nothing's going to be the same. And nothing was the same. My life wasn't the same. My wife's wasn't the same. My kids wasn't the same. My future going forward changed drastically. I had my sights set on retiring with that company. You know, I was going to do 20, 25 years and hang it up and have a good little chunk of change sitting there. I lost everything. Went from making, you know, close to 100,000 to like 35, 40. You know, I lost it all. I had to rebuild it. I'm still paying back taxes for, you know, taxes that went delinquent back then because I couldn't pay them. So even now, all these years later, I'm still rebuilding it. So my message to me the day before is just that, man, get ready because everything's about to change. And like I said, some stuff for the good. I have a whole new outlook on life now. I have a whole new appreciation for life now. I've done more traveling in the last 2 years since I got off and since my charges were dropped with this podcast than I ever did before. I've been to California, I've been to Vegas, I've been to New York multiple times. I just got back from Florida and I'm going again in 2 weeks for a movie premiere with a friend of mine that just put out a movie. I mean, it's almost like now that I know what could happen and what you can lose. Now I'm living, I don't want to say my best life. I think I'd like to say my best is yet to come, but I'm definitely living life and I'm seizing every opportunity that I can.
All right. I think that's a good place to end off. I'm going to stop recording. We'll talk after the show. But before I do stop recording, do you have any final thoughts or comments or anything you want to say to the audience?
You know, I know not everybody's going to agree with what I did. You know, there's going to be some people that are going to say you could have did this, you could have did that. You know, a lot of things maybe could have played out different, but it happened the way it happened. I hope people just take lessons from this and realize you can find yourselves in situations like this. So I hope you just take something from the story, whether you agree with it or not. Take something from the story to maybe help you later on. As I mentioned, I do have my own podcast channel. It's called Crime and Entertainment. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, pretty much everywhere you get audio podcasts. We do one a week, and we cover anybody from actors, from Sopranos, Sons of Anarchy, to former mob guys, drug smugglers. I mean, we're really across the board. The name kind of says it all: crime and entertainment. We have a little bit of everybody on. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and you think you would enjoy it, head on there and give a sub. We're closing in on 10,000 subs. Which is pretty good. I never thought it would reach that high. I never thought, honestly, I would keep going, but once it got dropped, I didn't want to stop. It was fun, and it kind of filled a void that was left in me. So I'm gonna keep rolling with it. And if you want to head on over there and give us a sub, we definitely appreciate it. And I appreciate you for having me on and let me tell the story.
Of course, man. All right. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll talk. All right. In 3, 2, 1.